the mystery. We have 14 people online. Apologize for a few minutes, but we're actually pretty much on time. It's 7:03. We certainly want to thank everybody for joining us for a second part of our training. So here's the same thing. Please go ahead and find the chat part on your screen, bottom, and go ahead and type in your first name, last name, flotilla number, as well as your ID number. And that will be used by Susan to keep track of everybody. And so forth. Okay, so appreciate you. What I'm going to be doing, folks, is I'm going to try to do a combination of things that are a little bit more than just what we had yesterday, which is to have a part where hopefully we can use a shared vision where I may be able to show some slides. So we're going to try to do different modes of how to say
presentation
ways of getting you to be a little bit more involved. So obviously our part 2 here today is focusing on chapter 2 or the task 2 and a part of task 3. The number 2 reading
Arlene, would you
focuses
get
on
me that brown envelope that had the writing on it?
Oh, somebody is talking in the back. If I could have everybody either mute, or if you choose not to, for side conversations. We will use the chat for purposes of asking people to answer questions like we had done with Walter, hopefully in a manner that will eventually get all of you to be feeling included and also feeling participative. So part 2 really is going to focus on those 2 parts. What you have right here, folks, is you have, and I still have to accept people here. Okay, all right, Will has submitted. Okay, very good. Some new chats. So the first thing I want to do is I want everybody, and this is the part where you can actually unmute yourself one person at a time. And I will actually ask people to do a quick little recap. So yesterday, we emphasized a lot of different parts of what TCOs and the responsibility of the TCO communications officer might actually be. So what I want is I want everybody to contribute a recall, a single recall. So please try to just let other people answer other ones. We don't want any repeats. So whoever's first, you can raise your hand in the chat, and then I will call on you. And what you do is people would actually then unmute themselves and answer it as I call your name. But if you recall one thing that you learned yesterday, please go ahead and then put yourself in the chat right now to say yes, and I will call on you as in the order in which you will kind of like submit. So anybody who wants to start? What do you remember from yesterday? Anything? Okay, Heather, you're our first person. Go ahead.
Hey there, everybody. I learned yesterday that 156.8 is channel 16 on the ham radio.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, who's next? And please go ahead and type in an order and then we'll call you so we don't want to have delay. Pure recall, folks. You know, the importance of recollections of something. You will retain more information, by the way, by reviewing your notes within 24 hours of the last time you actually did something. Go ahead, Mike.
I learned, and this is a real newcomer here, how to use the squelch function on the handheld radio.
Okay, and so we remember to let it fry a little bit, and as soon as you clear the frying part of it, that tells you that you are at a good level, therefore it actually will be prepared for good emissions. Okay, Bill Garvey.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. That the first thing you do in broadcasting or transmitting is you listen to make sure no one's talking and you don't step on their conversation.
That's right, and a good point, and as we're going to be talking about that today, it's especially important as you're trying to communicate both important messages, but possibly in a an element of emergency, or when the adrenaline is flying and going, when you may have that. Very good. Okay, John Swing, next.
Okay, the international VHF FM calling and safety frequency is 16. I think Heather mentioned earlier it's also 156.8, but that is the channel that's monitored by everyone.
Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about some other channels. There's actually other channels available for purposes of emergency. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Very good, John. Okay, Ed, you're next.
I basically learned the difference between Securite and Pon-Pon.
Okay, all right, so tell us, what is the difference?
Securite is a warning, and Pon-Pon was just an urgent communication.
Okay, urgent communication, advising mariners, asking them to possibly be either on the lookout for information or possibly sighting or rendering aid, but they're not part of the emergency, which is also very important. Very good. Who else do I have on the call here that has not yet participated? Everybody needs to do a little recall here. We have Mike, okay, Don, yes.
I learned the protocols for using the radio and proper procedures on keying the mic, and when to use the phonetic alphabet as opposed to simplistic language.
Okay, very good. And also understanding how far away should you actually have your mic away from you, Don? What would you say is a safe or a good distance to operate a mic to actually come out clear when you are in fact communicating?
Well, it depends on the mic, and you want to face it away from the wind or any distracting sounds. And it, again, it'll depend on the mic and how good the receiver is, but it could be a few inches to a foot away.
Yep. So very important things when people who are at the radio or at the elm, who do, by the way, hear things like they're calling your unit, you want to communicate with the person who is at the elm to calm down, is that correct? Or eventually bring the facility to a stop safely. And then also making sure that when you do see somebody picking up the mic, you want to make sure that everybody stops the little chatters around it. Is that correct? As we're talking and echoing, and some of our conversations would possibly be interfering with that in some ways. Very good. Kathy, and Mike, you're a mentor, so I'll get you next, okay? Kathy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I learned the silence, or the silence, the Mayday coming through.
Okay. And that's usually used, what is the purpose of that when? So usually a communication officer or somebody at a sector or a station may use that. Is that correct? Most of the time versus.
Yes. Yes, I'm new to this, so that would mean maybe clearing, like don't say anything until the message comes through.
Yep. And also most likely, Kathy, if you're new, obviously for a facilities perspective, that means that usually sector may ask people who are on the channel to stay out of it, because in fact there's something else that they're either working or they're trying to convey with people. Something that Walter may not have emphasized enough for some of you communication purposes. Don't forget that sector, having a tower with higher elevation and repeaters, they actually get signals from further away. So we may not hear on channel 16 a Mayday call of somebody who is 15 miles out to the Charleston Harbor coming back from a fishing trip. And so all we're hearing sector who's either responding, replying, saying things like, hey folks, Captain, what is your current location? And you're not hearing the other side of the conversation. That's because sector may have better line of sight for that communication. Mike, we're going to get you next. If everybody else in the class has done one turn, but go ahead, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I was reminded that if you start a communication, it's on you to always finish it with an out.
That's right. Very good. So you want to let the other person know. Very good. Did I get everybody at this point? Did everybody contribute, do a recall?
Joe Greenleaf,
Go ahead, Joe.
calling a station, you should repeat the station you're calling, their call sign or whatever they're using 3 times. By the way, somebody asked what my sordid past was. In another life, I used to be a Coast Guard radio man.
Very good. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right.
One more.
Okay, John, go ahead. You're next. You're going to put your name down on the list. Go ahead. Yes.
All right. I learned about what a rangefinder was that would tell you with the direction of the signal, and that way, as in last night when there was an open mic, they could determine who had the open mic and what the location would be. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The other night when there was a patrol, I had my radio on, and I didn't really think I would pick anything up, but I had it on 21 Alpha, and I heard, I guess it was 1 hour comms, and I heard them mention 843, and then it cut out. Is that because it had to build up a signal, and then it wasn't strong enough, or?
So most likely where you were at, John, meant that your line of sight to where the tower was or where they were emitting, you were getting either a partial or either a good clearance through the trees, whatever they may actually have been used. Usually these towers, by the way, are oriented towards the sea. I mean, obviously they are 360 degrees. There's one in McClellanville, there's one in Charleston, there's some south. And so there's various ways for them to also move that signal depending on who they're trying to hail. So they could possibly be working to try to get somebody out of another station, for example, further north, because they're trying to get a hold of the ANT team that's like traveling all the way up north to Georgetown. So that's one of the factors. The other factor is weather, clarity of weather, rain, humidity, all that may actually affect the distortion of the actual signal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's good questions. Did I get everybody? All right, so this was a really good recall, folks. I'm not trying to make it less personal. I just want everybody to kind of like understand that, you know, what I want to do is to try to emphasize certain key points. So I will be going in and out using both my picture, but also using some kind of a sharing of PowerPoint slides, and one you will see later the importance of it. So what you have, and I want you to go to your actual book, and what we want to emphasize really a lot here on this Chapter 2, Task 1 of the TCO, and the title is Controlling Communication with the Mariner. So the very and most important part right here, folks, is, and you've already said that, clarity of the message. Now, how does one keep clarity of the message? So if I could have people chat, or either chat, or we don't have that many people, so it's okay. Go ahead and come on and off your the various, you know, unless we're seeing too many people adding to the conversation. So I don't mind that. But hold on, there's one chat here. Okay, Ed. So go ahead. Ed says, speak slowly and clearly.
Sorry.
So how would you categorize that? What part of the message is that part of, Ed?
I'm sorry, what part of the message is that?
Yeah, so when you speak clearly to some, you know, and part of that communication, speaking slowly and clearly, what is that part of? What would be if you categorize it in some ways?
I'm sorry, I honestly don't know. I would suggest, and I sort of common practice, that you speak slowly and clearly through the entire communication.
Yeah. And so you're using what? You as a person, Ed, and this is not meant to put you on the spot. It's really it's the medium. So you're talking slowly, you're delivering, is that correct, that message? So what I was trying to emphasize here is that think a little bit of it from the perspective of when you are engaging in a two-way communication, the voice, the clarity, the modality of your conversation, the fact that you are in fact the voice of the Coast Guard, that you're speaking loud and clear and articulated is as important, is that correct, as the piece of equipment that you have. It's as important as the noise that surrounds you. Does it make any sense, Ed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bill, you added an important element here. So tell us a little bit about what do we mean? So what would be Coast Guard jargon? Go ahead.
Well, if you're using abbreviations and Coast Guard, Coast Guard speak, you're dealing probably with civilians, and they're not on the inside, so they don't know those codes. So you just speak in normal English.
Okay.
That's all.
So some of us here have dual roles. So Bill, you actually are an aviator. You are part of the aviation program of the Coast Guard and working through that program.
Yeah,
so tell us a little bit about.
I'm the Bobster.
Tell us a little bit about jargon. Joe, we're hearing some back-end conversations here. Joe Greenleaf. I'm going to mute you if that's okay. So go ahead,
That's fine.
Bill.
Okay. Examples of jargon, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, so what would be jargons that, for example, you may quickly think of using as an aviator that definitely doesn't translate? Because we're not talking about just U.S. Coast Guard jargon, is that correct? We're talking about any jargon in our conversation that we're trying.
A thing that comes to mind is if you're transmitting and you want to know whether they're receiving it clearly, you ask and they may respond I hear you 5 by 5. Well, that means nothing to anyone outside of the world. But that means the transmission is clear and understandable. CAVU in aviation is clear, visibility unlimited. VFR means visual flight rules. IMC means instrument conditions, and so on and so on. There's a host of, it's a whole dictionary, honestly.
Yeah, no, and that's good, and that's very important. I think what it is so maybe if I could have, and John Fresnito, I'll get you in a second, but Don, you might be hearing a lot of wording because obviously both Don with Morgan, your wife, who is at the command center, she uses wordings, I'm sure, in her day-to-day at home that basically reflects Coast Guard jargon. Is that correct? So what would be examples if you want to share?
That is correct. And an example, I don't know. Morgan, what would an example be?
Will we say like affirmative?
Well, like affirmative and copy, Roger, any of those. We use those terms quite fluently here. PFD.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Trailer. That's not really a word.
Trailered.
Okay, good. So those are a good example. John, you reflected on saying speaking clearly no matter how emotional the event is, which is certainly important to a couple of things. One is when we talk about the attention. So you can see from this picture, two people are engaged or hoping to engage in this communication, but the clarity doesn't come in just what Ed would talk about, what we were trying to talk earlier, which is how you say it, how you use the technology for it, but it's also the idea that the emotion. So when you do get sometimes a potential conversation of somebody, for example, reporting, we've been on a couple of calls. Mike, you may remember, you remember when Mike, we had the call came in, we were on the intercoastal going north, and we had that pom-pom with a potential person in the water of Sullivan's Island. Is that correct, Mike? You remember?
Yeah,
Okay.
vaguely.
Okay. So, the call came in unexpected. We were very close. We were before any kind of units could even actually mobilize. We were literally, I think, maybe 10 to 11 minutes away from the actual location. And by the way, most units, unless there's a unit already in the water doing certain activities, they are what we call on a Bravo status. Anybody know what the Bravo status mean? Anybody wants to share texting beside Mike and Susan? Okay, so Bravo status usually means that within 30 minutes of receiving a call, that you can actually work to gear up, plan, and get your unit on the way, and to eventually update either the command center or station as to what your ETA is. So you may actually hear Mike and myself, as well as Walter, completed this operations excellence. That was part of the requirements, and this is something that a lot of people at station would do. So there are crews who are housed at Trad Street with the Bravo status, and then there's actually a backup crew for that purpose. Okay. So Will Smith talked about the repeating back and using phonetics, which is very important. Walter saying wearing a mask, of course, especially under the current conditions, you are required to do so. The good news is Walter is listening. He's doing dual duty right now. Okay, so let's move on here. Well, we talked about the performance criterions that's asked of you. We talked about the clarity of speech, making sure that as a functioning watchstander, you watch for what you say and how you say it, and being the representative of the Coast Guard, you want to be focused on it. So this is why sometimes the noise. How many of you have actually gone and done a halo operation? So maybe actually, Will Smith, you were on the halo op last Friday, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so beside the fact that you were asked to wear a mask, which certainly enhanced, made it even more complicated, tell us a little bit about how communication was affected or had to be significantly, altered, considering that you had a helicopter trying to operate around you.
Yes, David, and everyone else, it was difficult to understand what the pilot was saying. Walter was a little more familiar with their procedures and what they were saying, and also listening to the man in the water and his radio was pretty garbled. So you have to listen carefully when you're working with him. It's a different environment, the noise of the helicopter and the water and all that, and the boat noise and all. So yeah, difficult to understand what they're saying and communicate.
Very good. Okay, so I want everybody to turn to page 22 if I could. There's a basic glossary of terms, and I want you to start understanding the differences and then the linkages between some of these. So you see ACU, NACOS, DROX, MARB, NACOS, OIA, OD, UFAC, and TCO. So if I could have people take turns here to try to maybe even attempt it, it's okay. What is the relationship between some of those? Anybody?
I don't think you'd be talking about DIROX if you're on a radio patrol.
Yeah. So DIROX is, who is DIROX, John?
It's the director of the auxiliary.
Yep. And they oversee our overall effort, our training, as well as our operation, the oversight, the issues of standards. Okay. So, but now let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the others. So what is the relationship between an ACU and a TCO? So let me use the
Be a
example.
qualified TCO to operate an ACU?
That's correct, Mike. Good job. Yes, absolutely. So all of you are working towards your TCO qualification. You become to the communications officer. At that point, depending on the level, you will be qualified, obviously, to operate and stand watch on a radio, 25 amps, on a facility, or possibly a vehicle if you get your vehicle also certified as a unit, as a mobile unit. Will, you have an ACU, is that correct? So your boat is officially a auxiliary communication unit indirectly because you are a facility that has a radio. And you'll eventually become a certified operator. Oh, go ahead.
I just said yes, David, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yes. So what you have on the other terms, folks, is the UFBAC is just the operational facility. So that could be a difference between an ACU, which is an auxiliary communication unit. The UFBAC in this case is a little bit synonym, but you could have an ACU, which is in my car. So my car has a 25 watt. I think John Francisco is looking at getting his car geared up and eventually inspected and eventually become one. And we have other people who have actually a standing station. They actually have more than a car and a better equipment. The OIA is the order issuing authority. They're the people who give us permission to operate. This is also especially going to be important when we actually have things that are going to be going into full swing, which is when we do decide to have what we call net control station or NECAs, or what we may actually have other things that come into play, which is also an alternative net control station. This, by the way, might be important. All of you are going to be part of that net. If, in fact, Rescue 21 goes down, if you have a hurricane, we may be called to actually support and eventually cover the coast of South Carolina from Georgetown, supporting all the way down to Savannah to support to make sure that we position facilities and units and people to be able to get the calls personally. So that's just an overview of the actual glossary here on page 22. Let's go to any questions so far.
Yes.
Oh, somebody's asking Heather. I'm talking about the book. It's not the book itself. It's the actual auxiliary communication qualification standard that we started using last night. So it's not a book.
It's attached to the meeting.
I'm sorry. I don't call it. I should have used the right term. It's the PQS. Are you all set, Heather? Okay, good. Very good. So now let's go on to task 2-2. So it actually asks us if this one is really focusing on the proper band for distress. So let me just, we covered already the jargon, by the way. We want to make sure that people are clear on that. We talked a little bit about CALM. So before we actually go into the channel itself, what I wanted to show you is a quick little video. This is actually an actual call. So if you give me a second, I'm going to be able to share the sound associated with, so it says, show name.
2015's regatta was supposed to be another peaceful day on the water, but that quickly turned to disaster.
We need help. We're bottom ship channel and we see flares.
Sporadic radio calls coming into Coast Guard Sector Mobile's comm room as they too tried to assess what to do.
Coast Guard received a report of a 24-foot white vessel, 99 tons, is dead in the water under the Dolphin Island Bridge. All mariners request to keep the ship lookout, assist if possible.
In the nearly half hour of audio recordings, we hear distress calls, mainly from crews who are okay, but they're watching others get stranded by the storm.
U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, Mayday, Mayday, but we are about to lose 5 lives. If you don't respond to me, answer me, or do something, over.
Coast Guard, I have coordinates of a sunk boat and a man overboard. Coast Guard, we had a capsized vessel in the bay. Negative, we can't see
As the weather calmed, some checked in just to give others relief.
I believe people are probably looking for it. We're safely at somebody's house. Nothing is wrong.
Others reported problems along the coast.
And there's large floating debris out here. Somebody's pier has been torn up, so we're concerned about boats coming through here and hitting this stuff.
The recordings end as days of search, rescue, and recovery began. Along Mobile Bay, Chad Petrie, News 5.
All right, so as you can see from this video, everybody heard it?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can see, this is the 30 minutes weather change, and suddenly on channel 16, which is what Morgan and Don's wife currently works at the sector, and she will be spending some time talking about that. So a lot of responsibility put in both on the people who are manning the communication as the phone and the radios are going off, and then the clarity. As you can see, people communicate and panic. Some of the information could be accurate, or also sometimes, which is most of the time, may be misguided, not complete. You know, so this is why it's very important that we master or we help in this process.
2050.
So here's what I want to do next, if I could. I want everybody, if possible, to take a little bit of time. Let me see if I'm on the right task here. We're not gonna have time for the breakout. No, sorry. We'll skip that one for the next time. Okay, sorry. I apologize. Let's go on to page 13, if I could. It says, what channel or frequency is the International Safety Distress Call Signal frequency, folks?
16.
16. Bill Harvey indicated 16. Okay. So 16 is the international known channel for communicating a distress. So that's the one that will be standard. You have to understand there's multiple regions. Okay, good. See which channel or frequency are the primary and secondary working channels, especially as we work as a unit or with stations. So if I could have people who've been on facilities with us, we usually operate out of what channel?
21 Alpha.
21 Alpha.
Is it John Swing?
Yes.
Oh, Wayne's, okay, sorry. Will just indicated 21 Alpha is our primary. That one could be. We always have to work and communicate with the sector comm center or the station to confirm that is 21 Alpha. It is not always the case. They might be on another channel. They might be working off another channel. They may have other traffic. They may have other cases going on. So don't assume, and you may then be required to make a phone call. But 21 Alpha. And what is the channel that most of the time they're going to ask us to always monitor?
16.
16, because if we are not reporting on 21 Alpha and we've messed the squash or the sound, or we may have used a hailer, for example, and messed up our radios, then there will be eventually a need for them to call us on 16 to possibly check in. Good. What is what we call bridge-to-bridge frequency?
13.
Okay, and that's done. A bridge is 13. And so that's the primary bridge one. We're going to talk about it. There's actually an alternative, but that is the main one. Very good. What is the primary liaison channel or frequency when we are trying to communicate with non-government? So the Coast Guard we use, so if they are in fact hailing a boat on channel 16 that needs help, but may not have an emergency, they're most likely going to use another channel. Which one is that? So if it's not 16 and it's not 21 Alpha, because 21 Alpha is their operational channel, which one would it be? All right. Yes, Don. 22 Alpha. It is not 9. We're going to talk about the rows here in a second that tells you. And 22 Alpha is also the one where they communicate. What do they usually also use 22 Alpha for?
Radio check.
No, that will be 27. 22 Alpha is, they will usually come up on 16, and what do they actually, they make an announcement, and what do they say usually?
Weather?
No, weather would be on channel 1 because the Coast Guard does not issue weather reports.
Marine assistance.
Okay. Or in some cases, marine assistance. So Mike, for example, if they say, please switch to 22 alpha because I'm just trying to coordinate a tow, that's one. But the second one for 22 alpha is when you actually want to put out an announcement, for example, for more details on lights that are out, or an announcement for debris, other kinds of information. So notices to mariners that might be very important, that might actually require the attention of a skipper. Okay. And the last one is, what are the two command or control channels frequency? So what are the two channels that are usually used? And by the way, we say command is, especially if we do have a PATCOM, which is a patrol commander, somebody who manages multiple of units like the bridge run and so forth. What would be those channels? Well, good answer, Don, but we don't have access to the ASMAT Safety Marine. We don't have access to the 800 megahertz. So on the regular channel, 83 is not one. It is available, but that's not the one that actually would be. When we say, by the way, command and control, that's because it's actually something that the Coast Guard has authority over. Okay, it's 21 and it's 23. And that 23 is the one that they would actually be able to kick people off the channel. So what I'm sharing right here, folks, is a quick little rows. And by the way, you can see here, channel 16 is the main distress. The supplementary distress is 67, hardly used. We always direct people to 16. There's also the channel 70, by the way. Channel 70 is actually an unowned distress channel. And what does DSC stand for? Anybody?
It's digital satellite control.
Russ.
Digital satellite control.
Nope.
Distress and safety calling.
Almost, John. So it's distress.
I have it on here.
Distress selective calling.
Selective.
Okay. And that's basically where, if you actually have beacons, is that correct? So it's actually using technology that communicates through that channel. Okay. I have, sorry, a couple of people have just joined. For some of you who are just joining us, welcome. So just to be clear, so that's the overall layout here. And by the way, the channels that are in blue are repeater base. You have the 13 is the ship to safety information. So that's the one that Don had answered. You see a lot of the channels on port operations. You may have the Charleston Port Authorities using it. You may have various marinas might be using channels that are 72, 68, 78, whatever they may actually be, and then eventually work to transfer that information for people. So we're asking you to just have some basic knowledge of those channels. So,
David, is 13 the same for state, the international ship-to-ship channel or frequency? And what did they be used for?
What do you mean by state, Bill?
I'm reading the answers here, or the questions, and under the
The
one,
fourth block down,
Yeah.
David.
Yes, I'm sorry. I
You
apologize.
did 16, 21, 13, and then you left the next one blank.
Yep. Sorry. So state the international ship-to-ship channel or frequency. It is 13 and 6. Okay, because actually you see here on that little rows there, Bill, you see search and rescue. So that means that if you have a couple of boats that are in one area trying to help to actually, for example, find a person in the water, they could use that channel 6 as almost an intranet of a particular area.
okay, thanks.
Okay?
Yeah.
But very good question. And on the next question, by the way, it says to state the primary liaison channel, which is going to be, I said, 22 alpha. And it does ask you here also name 2 broadcasts that are really used. What broadcasts are usually sent out on 22 alpha? if you go to your page 22, you're going to have one that's there. And that's the MARB, the Marine Assistance Radio Broadcast. So they'll issue a MARB, which is when they're saying that please be on the lookout for assistance. Another one could be there might be a piece of debris. There's a report of a log of Pier Alpha off the Ashley River. No, that would be the Cooper River, sorry. All mariners are cautioned to advance with caution and report any sighting on the United States Coast Guard. So they'll issue certain information to people using that 22 Alpha. Okay. I think that wraps up our task 2. Any questions on that, folks? Okay.
David, on the Appendix A, the glossary.
Yes, sir.
What is the significance of all those things to what we're doing?
So you may have people just for you to understand the roles and responsibility more than anything else. There are acronyms. You will not go ahead and use the radio and say, yes, please speak to the OOD, though that's a jargon that some people may use. That's the officer on deck or the officer in charge. So there is, for example, an OOD at sector, for example, that might be in charge of search and rescue operations. So they have various responsibilities. Does it make any sense?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Now, what's very important, by the way, is if you only have to use the radio, and let's say you are on the Wando River and there is an explosion at the Mount Pleasant terminal, and you are there because you were just passing by, you would want to know that besides reporting the sighting and staying off, and by the way, your responsibility as a unit is not to respond. We actually have, unless instructed specifically by the captain of the port, even as auxiliaries, we have no responsibility unless instructed specifically under the direction of the captain of the ports by a issuing authority, the one that have approved our orders. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes. Affirmative.
So just to have that knowledge a little bit. So on the task number 3, we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of the different signals, if I could call. So we've already heard earlier. So let's talk a little bit about the difference and explaining them. And you should by now know the difference and the nuance between each one of those. So anybody want to take a quick little, I'll take any volunteers, take any one of those and then please simulate a call that comes in as complete as possible with all the information associated with one of these calls. And then what I would want is I would want somebody else on the call that will say, okay, what I heard Mike Young says this, and this is what our unit should think about. Does it make sense? So I want you to one person to give an example of what that call is, and then another person who will eventually interpret it. Okay, so Bill Garvey, you want to do the Mayday. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is the cruiser Holiday. We are dead in the water near Patriots Point, and we are on fire. There are 7 souls on board, and we need assistance immediately.
Okay, so what does, for somebody, who wants to take the call? Who think they got the information that Bill just shared? Okay.
This is station Coast Guard station. What is your position?
You said they were opposite the.
Position, if you can provide latitude and longitude.
Okay, so But Mike, I'm not necessarily asking you about the other side. I'm asking you, what does it mean? What would you, so, I'm sorry, let's simulate what you would interpret that information.
Well, if he's on fire, then it's clearly a mayday, and to me, that's clearly a mayday if he's on fire.
Okay, so what does mayday mean?
Come to my aid.
You're on the verge of sinking.
That's right. Grave danger, immediate assistance needed. There's the potential danger and the loss of life, the loss of property. Okay, so there's an immediate action needed. Okay, all right. So what does the next one mean?
SOS?
Yeah. That's actually something that's left off from actually communication using either Morse or possibly, is that correct?
Yes.
That's the equivalent. So SOS and Mayday are very similar. SOS is save our soul, which is the same thing, that we actually have danger of life. Okay, so it's the same thing as the assistance. Who wants to take the next one? Pom 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 pom, and give us a call. Eddie? Who wants to do that pom-pom one? Any volunteers?
I'll do it.
Okay, John.
Pon, large vessel struck timber in the water and is stranded in harbor.
Okay. So that, what would be the difference between that and security? So
security would be a warning, and the pon would be as a result of something already happening.
Okay. So the pom-pom would be, what would be a word that I'm looking for is urgency of the message really kind of speaks to the concerning safety around, is that correct?
Right.
They also have, when is pom-pom used also, by the way?
To report a structure in the shipping lane, an obstruction.
Okay.
Potential hazard.
Okay. And for what other purposes? You may hear it a lot actually on SAR cases. What would I say that?
If the SAR case is still happening.
That's right. It's a report of person in the water, jumper off a bridge, capsize, collision. Is that correct? All those will come as a pom-pom because in this case, it's to notify the mariners that something is going on. We've already covered security, which is a signal for safety broadcasting, which is people letting know what they are. Okay. And the last one is on the EPIRB, talking about two main types of electronic positioning, radio beacon systems and operation and their type. So what are they? Yep, GPS, Bill Garvey, very good one. So 121.5. So you also have different megahertz. Is that correct? So you may also have what we call float phase or what we call automatic and manual activated satellites. Is that correct? So there's category 1 and category 2. So it's just for you to know that there's different ways to do classifications. Okay. All right. Now I will, if that's okay, move it to Susan. And Susan is going to be leading us into task of 3.2.
Hey folks, we're going to take about 15 minutes and go over some of the basic
3.1, sorry.
Information on the chart. David, would you pull up the first slide? There you go. Okay, we can see from this slide that this is chart number 11524. This is the chart that most of y'all, unless you live in Tennessee, need to be aware of. There's a ton of information on a chart, and we've just gotten a couple of snapshots here to show you some of the most important things. If you will look at the lower right corner of the chart going up, you will see the numbers 32 degrees 44 minutes. That is the latitude. And if you look down at the corner of the chart, go directly to your left, you'll find 79 degrees 50 minutes. That is where the longitude starts. Now, if you get to something smaller, you will find that each one of the minutes is divided into tenths. Down at the bottom of the chart, you have 79 degrees 50 minutes, and if you look left, you will find the 51-minute mark. There are 10 sections between that chart, and in the very first minute of the chart, you will see 6 small lines, or lines that divide the chart in the line into 6 segments. Each one of those is 10 seconds, okay? The distance, if you look up on the chart on the latitude scale, the distance between 32 degrees and the next one up, which you cannot see, which 44 minutes, which would be 32 degrees 45 minutes, the distance between those two is 1 nautical mile. Make sure that when you are measuring distances, if you indeed do not ever use the longitude scale at the bottom, because that varies depending on where you are on the Earth's surface, whereas the latitude always remains the same distance. The main latitude that you should be thinking about, if you're thinking about latitudes, is the equator, which is 90 degrees, and the north and south poles, which are 0 degrees north or 0 degrees south. Everything is divided into segments based on that, and they're divided into equal segments. You'll also notice under the words Charleston Harbor, soundings in feet. These, so the soundings, sometimes if you're out in the ocean, you'll have soundings in fathoms, but we are close to shore here and there's soundings in feet. And if you look at the chart, the section we're looking at here, you will see that we've got several colors, and on a bigger chart you would have more than just those colors, but as you can tell from looking at the numbers, the lighter the color, the deeper the water. You're right, Walter. You are right. Up on the Rouse Tuck, Reindeer Falls. All right, right. 90 degrees is the equator, guys. I'll be fine. 0 degrees. 0 degrees is the equator. 90 degrees is the North and South Pole. Okay, so we are 32 degrees north of the equator, which is 0 degrees, a belt around the Earth. If you ever have trouble remembering latitude and longitude, remember latitude is the equator and longitude are the long lines that go from the North Pole to the South Pole. As a teacher friend of mine was teaching his 8th grade students, long like a thong. Okay, let's look again at the curves. You can see, let me turn mine down a little bit so it's a little bit clearer.
Susan, can I ask, what is this chart? What is this official chart?
This is 11/5/24. This is the Charleston Harbor chart.
From NOAA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is available for free as a PDF, whether you print it or not. But if you want to play with it and be well versed, you can actually type in NOAA chart 11/5/24. It's available as a download.
You can just simply go and on Google and type in chart 11524, and a whole bunch of options will point up for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, the lines on the chart that denote the water depths can actually be used. Some sailors use them, especially if they're offshore, as another way to navigate. So we have, if you look at 303, we have talked about longitude and latitude scale. We've identified 1 nautical mile. We are measuring here in curves, and we're measuring in feet. And then I want to go down to the buoy symbols. You will see several buoys on this chart. If you look, if you find the line that goes across the South Jetty and you look to the left of that line, you will see that we've got a green number 1. The number is in parentheses. That is a buoy. It's got a circle with that elongated diamond on it. And then you've got the red buoy on the other side, which is a nun buoy, and that is number 2. Those buoys, the indication with those 2 buoys is that they are not lit. And the way you can tell that is if you look up to the top of the chart where you see buoy green 21. With buoys, odd numbers are green. They are cans. Even numbered buoys are red, and they're called nuns. They have the pointy hats like the top of a nun would have. However, the circle that is underneath 1 and 2 is a clear circle, whereas the circle for 21 at the top is, they call it red, I call it puce. Anyway, it's a violet color, which indicates that it is a lit buoy. Okay, let's go to the next one, please, David.
Yep.
Okay, I really wanted to point this out. I want you to look at the line that goes from the top all the way down to the lower right corner. We were out the other night, and when we were out, the tide was pretty high and it was windy. And it's very difficult to see, but a lot of that jetty there is submerged. And if you will see midway through the line, it'll say there in print, SUBM, submerged jetty, okay? Once again, if you look in the center of the screen, there's like a backwards L. You'll see how shallow that water is over there. You really have to pay attention to these colors because they're very significant. Also, you have under the words North Jetty on the lower right-hand side, it says submerged jetty also. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is just a little bit further up, and we have lots and lots of things in this particular chart. When you're out on the water, it's really good if you look on land to see if you can find something to help you identify where you are. There were times when I was on the Neuse River going up the Neuse, you couldn't tell where you were. There were no towers, there were no anything. If I did not have a GPS, I would not have a clue as to my location on the river, other than saying the Neuse River, which is like 50 miles long, which isn't very helpful. So you'll see on the lower right-hand part, you'll see the Charleston light. It tells you that's a flashing light, 30 seconds. It's 163 feet high, which is approximately with a 20-meter lumens. Okay, if you go, yeah, thank you. Okay, go to the left and let's hit Fort Moultrie and the tower or the church that's near it, which you would also be able to see from the water. These are very helpful. If you go up further toward the tip of Sullivan's Island, you'll see there that there's a boat ramp. Can you get that one, David?
Yeah, I'm trying with the mouse. Sorry, it's acting up.
Okay. Well, if you go up toward the point, you'll see where that
Right
says
here.
you've got, yeah, there you go. It's a boat ramp. It's always good to know where the boat ramps are. Also, if you see going up the right hand, the southwestern side of Sullivan's Island. You'll notice that it gets very shallow very quickly there, and there are many, many, many submerged areas there. You have to be very careful when you're in that area because of that. All right.
You want to show people? So folks, I just want to quickly show, let me see here. See if I can go back.
What? Sure. Go ahead.
What Susan is referring to, gosh, no, sorry. It's
Susan,
this area right here. See
Here.
these little dotted
There.
lines? So that actually shows you that depending on when the actual tide might actually be, you may or may not see portions of it. And so it's very important to do that. Bill Garvey, you had a question?
well, I just want to confirm these depth numbers are at low tide, right?
It's supposed to be mean low,
Mean low. Okay.
low tide, water depth. They usually call it mean low rather than just low.
Okay, thank you.
And don't forget.
And around here, folks, when you go out on the water, you really need to know when was, and we'll get to that, not today, but Thursday, how to read the tide table. You need to know whether the tide is going in or going out, and about where in the tide cycle you are, because it can make a big difference.
Yeah,
okay, let's go.
Tonight,
to
by the way, is one of the highest moons. Is that correct? So if you haven't seen it, Charleston is flooding today or this evening, and then the opposite of that is if you were watching and being there at sunrise of Sullivan's Island, I can predict that there will be a lot of the land will show extensively because it's one of the lowest and the highest tide right now of the year.
Right,
And by the way,
supposed to be
beautiful moon tonight.
a pink moon tonight. Yeah, it's very instructive if you're ever in one of these areas at a real low tide, like you're going to get tonight, to see what's out there. I used to walk the river after hurricanes when all the water had gone out to see just what was lurking underneath that you would never know about otherwise. Picked up a nice angle. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. Here is another part of the slide, and one of the things I wanted you to see here was the compass rose. Okay, there's also general information blocks in the same area, but the compass rose has two different signatures. I don't suppose you can see this, David, can you, when I do that? Can you go up and hit the north because the top part of it didn't come out? Thank you. Okay, go back.
You in a second. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. All right, there's north. That is true north. All right. However, we also have a magnetic north because, as we know, that the magnetic poles of the Earth vary. Now, this particular for the location it is, if you go closer to the center, you will see on the upper part of the circle it says VAR 7 degrees 45 minutes west. That means that the variation from magnetic north to true north at this one place on the chart, I have seen charts where the variation differs depending on what part of the chart you're on. So you really always need to use the compass rose that is closest to your location. It says that it is 7 minutes and 45 seconds west. And if you look, you'll see that the little arrow is pretty to a regular north. It would be almost exactly just a little bit shy of 8 degrees left of north. And this was calculated in 2015. So we're taking, this is 5 years after that. Why is that important? Some charts that you'll get were printed one heck of a long time ago. And because the magnetic center of the Earth moves, you're going to have the variation change. How do you account for that? if you look at the bottom part of that inner circle, you will see the words annual increase. What you cannot see is the itty bitty little thing, but it is 4 seconds, okay? And that means for every year, so it's been 5 years at 4 seconds. 4 times 5 is 20, so I would add 20 seconds to the 45 seconds that are shown on the variation, which would be 7 minutes 65 seconds or 8 minutes 5 seconds. So it has moved an extra 20 seconds further west than what this compass rose shows. Okay. Oh. Do we use true or magnetic when describing a course? It depends on how your GPS is set up. You have another little interesting sideline of this. I have always used compass. When I'm actually plotting a course on a chart, I would most likely use compass. Compass is not the whole answer because your boat has many devices on it which contain metal, which can also throw off your compass. I had a terrible problem with my boat one time. I could not figure out why the compass was acting like it was, and what I didn't realize is the radio was on and the mic was hanging right next to the compass, and the field, the electronic field was throwing the compass off. So you also have something called boxing the compass that you do if you're really, really serious about this, which is a procedure we'll get into at another time, okay? But if I were putting, 9 times out of 10, if I were putting a course to steer on a chart, I would be using the compass course. Any other questions about the compass rose? Oh, and the right you're seeing here is water depth, by the way, for all the ranges and everything else. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right, this is at the bottom of the chart. And David, is there any way you can show, there's a scale there. It's really difficult to see. It's at the bottom. The scale says it's 1 for every 20,000. And it also said that earlier on the chart block, but it also gives it in yards and in meters.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I see it now. Sorry, I was.
Yeah, it's up here. It's under the words James Island.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another compass rose right there. It's got the same measurement as the other one did, 745. Okay. You can use, and the top is nautical miles. You can use that scale, but really, if you're working on the chart, it's probably easier to use the scale on the side of the chart, which is the same, which is nautical miles. All right. The remainder of this session for 3.1 has to be done with a mentor, so I'm not going to go over that at this time. And I'd like to just add one more thing. If you would switch over to 3.3.
What page?
We will do this very quickly. It's page 15. They tell you up at the top of 3.3, it says references local telephone directories and Chapter 2 National Search and Rescue Manual. That manual is obsolete. You can't access it anymore. I know because I was right about it being obsolete. We've got a total new search and rescue program now called SC&E. The old SAR is gone. Local telephone numbers for Coast Guard units. I Googled it to get mine, and I have mine programmed in my phone. I have both sector and station in my phone. If you want to go to the second one, which is locate telephone numbers of local auxiliary unit operations officers and key personnel, I would go to aux directory. That would be, and type in, which one you're looking for. But you can find them on aux directory. If you've not used it, it's extremely helpful.
Susan, you want to talk a little bit about, there's the phone number for sector, but there's also sector and there's also the comm center. So just for people to know, I'm going to go ahead and type it in, but if you want to keep tab, my computer is actually operating a little funny. So if you want to take that down, the phone number for the sector command main line to which they can then transfer you to the comm center is 843-740-5050. 7050. I apologize. 843-740-7050. So Walter just go ahead and wrote it down. Sorry, I'm unable to operate in the chat. So that's for sector. You also have station. Station is during the weekday operation, and the phone number is 843-720-7727. Again, 843-720-7727. So depending on our guard taken by, whether it be sector, if it's during the weekdays and they actually have the comm center at Trad Street, we will actually ask that station takes our guard, and then they close usually around 4 p.m. and that might move on to sector, especially in the evening. Walter's sharing a bunch of phone numbers as far as the comm center main number versus the sector for communication purposes. It's good to have. Go ahead. Sorry, Susan.
Right. No, thank you. Because I have always used the 7050, and then they just sent me over to 7053. Local telephone numbers for local law enforcement agencies. I would call 911. Also for local fire and paramedics, same thing. The only thing is, if you want the harbor patrols or the harbor masters, when David and I were talking about this earlier today, we said go through sector.
Yep. Same with DNR. So I mean,
right, David?
Work with them and let them take care of that communication. I think Walter, for example, we're on a patrol. There was somebody who may have been intoxicated. And so we followed the chain of communication. We called, what they called, Mike, you were actually on that patrol, is that correct? Yeah, Walter's saying the person was falling drunk. He actually had, he must have forgotten that crab bank was there. His boat was on the actual sand. The only thing that Walter could possibly do besides reporting the status of that person is to ask him to wear a life jacket, because literally he was so intoxicated. When they came back from that halo operation, all they know is that that person was no longer on Crab Bank. His boat was still there. But communicate with sector. Sector may notify other agencies and other individuals, whether it be DNR, whoever has jurisdiction. So it's, I think the best way is, and they have access to resources. They have access to the 800 megahertz harbor channels. There's 2 channels to which they may have a bunch of units, whether it be fire, DNR, rescue, county, sheriffs, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, PD. You may see some of those units. So for example, Sullivan's Island just got a ramp, so they actually have now a boat on ready at their ramp in Sullivan, so they can actually deploy quickly and have a brand new boat. So there's a lot of agencies and assets, and it's best to go through the comm center, who will then talk to the 911 dispatchers, and they will work together. So Don will talk more, sorry, not Don, Morgan will talk more about that tomorrow night.
Okay, and we will finish, we did not do 0302, I know that. We will do that Thursday night. And
Okay.
that's it for me.
Yeah. So I think, folks, that does it. I know some of you may have come in later. Please go ahead and type in the chat room your first name, last name, flotilla number, and your ID number if you did not. I don't know if some of you kind of like lost the call and came back on. I just want to make sure that we have the right set of attendants. We appreciate your time.
David?
One thing I do want to say is, and I think, Susan, you might want to talk about it from the IS perspective. An email.
That's what I was just going to do.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the importance and what will be done for recording their time to train for this.
Okay. When you are recording your training time, you as a trainee, it goes on your 7029 form in column D. Okay? The instructors goes on the 7029 form in column B. I checked with Sue Hastings about that
Okay.
today.
So,
And once your PQS is completed, that's another story. It will be turned in. Okay.
so folks, again, you don't have to submit anything. An email went out from Philippe today. Aux data is down until Aux data 2 is up, which will be around the 15th of April. So just keep a good note of those nights and preparation and study. I recommend that you go back to your notes before tomorrow's meeting. Hopefully they'll spend some time recapping tomorrow, but otherwise, wishing you a great evening. Again, thank
Hey,
you so
David?
much for taking the time. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, quick question. Some of us have been assigned as mentors. You guys talked about how we're going to do that remotely?
Nope, but
I've communicated with my people. I think the mentor is going to probably communicate with you individually because it's all different.
I'm
I mean,
a
I've got
mentor.
people in my neighborhood, so I'm going to do them.
Okay, so we sign off basically just by remotes. We just do like a mini Zoom session. Is that what you guys are doing?
No, I'm not sure exactly. I'm going to do anything I find legal to do with the, you could do it in Zoom.
yeah, let's have the instructors talk and
I
take
mean,
it offline.
you could actually do it over the telephone.
Yeah, maybe just talk about it a little bit offline.
Yeah, we'll take that offline. We don't want to confuse the trainees, but for some of you, we will be communicating with you. We have divided up the assignment. We have between 3 and 4 trainees per trainer or per mentor, and we'll work with you to work to complete the various tasks and demonstrating knowledge. So hopefully you can make it tomorrow night, and then the following night. And we hope that, by the way, we may ask that you stay on a little bit longer on Thursday so we can finish up. Walter will try to work to complete all of the content by then.
Very good. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.